This short contains one of the most darkest jokes in Looney Tunes history, and I can't believe they got away with it. So this is our review for Wideo Wabbit. With me today to discuss some videos are my good friends Mark Arnold and Kamden Spies. Say hi.
Hi, I'm glad to be on this video.
Are you glad to be on this video, Mark?
Yeah, very much. Very much.
Also, my good friend Eli Copperman, who's joined me on a few reviews, he sent me a recording of his thoughts on this short, so you're also going to hear him all throughout. First up, I'm going to get Eli to introduce himself.
Hey there, Anthony. How's it going? I hope all is well with you 70 years after this cartoon came out. Wideo Wabbit is definitely an interesting cartoon as far as Robert McKimson's earlier post-shutdown efforts are concerned. Compared to, say, maybe Frizz or Chuck, McKimson actually embraced television as a medium. It's fascinating that he and Ted Pierce saw value in the medium when it was starting to blossom around this time, mostly through sitcoms and talk shows, of course.
So a few bits of info to get underway. So as mentioned, this is a review for Wideo Wabbit, released on the 27th of October 1956. It's the 783rd in the series, and it's directed by Bob McKimson. You can find this restoration on the Looney Tunes Gone Collection Volume 3 DVD set, and I'll have a link below to that set. As far as I'm aware, the high-definition version hasn't been made available yet. Hopefully it will one day. It's restored, it's ready to go, maybe on an upcoming Collector's Vault volume. We'll see, but at least we have it in good old-fashioned DVD, right, boys?
Right.
Now, due to copyright, I can't show you the full cartoon here. The video will just get blocked, but in case you haven't seen this one, Bugs Bunny answers a newspaper ad for a part in a television show, only to discover he's being cast as live prey for Elmer Fudd, who's achieving some great success as a host of the Sportsman now. And, of course, hilarity ensues as we go through a time capsule, really, of 1950s television. I'll go through a few bits of trivia before we discuss those 1950 TV trivia, because there's a lot of it in this one. It is very much a time capsule. First of all, the working title for this is as per the animated draft, and this is provided by Devin Baxter, so definitely check it out if you want to know who animated what, but the working title was Omnibunny. Why Omnibunny?
Ooh, I know. In the 1950s, there was a TV show called Omnibus. And so they figured, parodying other TV shows, let's do that. And it would have been a show like that where they show a variety of topics of different subjects. It's kind of like a news magazine, as it were. So
so there you go. You've earned your keep on this review. There we go. So, of course, just vocal credits. This should be obvious, but I'm mentioning it anyway for those who aren't aware. So, of course, Mel Blanc, he gets the sole voice credit. He does Bugs Bunny, and he does the Liberace impression, and, of course, the producer, and I'll go through his reference in just a moment. You got Arthur Q. Bryan, Elmer Fudd, that's pretty standard, but you've also got Dawes Butler, and he does the various TV impersonators, including voicing Bugs Bunny for the first time, but, of course, impersonating Groucho Marx. One interesting thing I did notice about this one, and funnily enough, we're actually on both of these reviews, but with this one and the Honey Mouses, you'll notice one interesting credit. It says, edited by Irvin Jay, and normally you see Treg Brown, so he was more of a sound editor, but for whatever reason, he is credited as a film editor in this one and the Honey Mouses. There's no documentation that's surfaced as to why this happened. Did he just fill in? Maybe Treg Brown was sick or something? No one really knows why, but that's probably the likely reasons. Have you guys ever heard of him before?
No, I have not.
I've never seen him either. In fact, even though I've read Jerry Beck's book, I look and I go, hey, there it is. There he is. Who is he?
In fact, this is like brand new information that clearly passed my mind when we're reviewing this cartoon again.
I probably thought it was Treg Brown, too.
Like, you're so used to seeing Treg Brown, and yet looking at the credits going, wait a minute, who's this guy? And yeah, sure enough, he was a sound editor that seems to have been temporarily promoted. And again, I think that's the likely explanation. He probably just covered Trek. Maybe he was sick or something, or maybe he was on a holiday or whatever. A few more references. So that producer that I was referring to earlier on, that is a reference to a person by the name of Frank Nelson. Now, so I'm not talking all the time. Mark, who is Frank Nelson?
Frank Nelson is a guy that did a lot of announcing and other voice work. The main thing he's probably best known for nowadays is the guy that appears behind the counter when Jack Benny is buying something and he turns around and all of a sudden goes, yes!
Beautiful.
And he did cartoon voices even in the 70s for The Oddball Couple, for Patty Freeling. Jerry Beck's Looney Tunes and Melodies, I trust implicitly, but it can have errors. Is Mel Blanc doing this voice, or is it actually the Frank Nelson? Because Jerry Beck says it's the Frank Nelson.
It's Mel Blanc.
Okay, so Jerry's wrong. Okay,
How
sorry.
dare he be wrong? How dare he? How
Okay, we'll
dare
blame it on Will Friedwell. Okay,
There we go. We'll blame it on him.
And Irvin Jay.
That's it. McKimson must have loved this Frank Nelson parody so much that Mel Blanc did the same thing in People Are Bunny. And speaking of People Are Bunny, you might have noticed one of the gags in this one, involving Bugs Bunny as the usher and Elmer Fudd walks in. That is directly lifted for People Are Bunny, but they changed Daffy Duck instead of Elmer for that. Recycled footage and ideas? Nah, unheard of. We never see that happen. But the bigger thing that was recycled, if you look at the piano sequence, that might look familiar to you. That comes from Rhapsody Rabbit, that little bit. The piano's different, so they would have just had to trace all the frames or whatever.
That does seem a lot more jarring than a lot of reused animation, because it's like whatever year Rhapsody Rabbit was made, and this is 1950. What year are we on, Anthony?
56.
56. It's night and day difference.
That's the interesting thing, because let's not kid ourselves. The animation quality in this one, it's definitely not as good. It's not terrible, but it's definitely lower, especially in the scenes where you see Elmer Fudd's close-up.
So are most of the Warner Brothers cartoons by this point, though.
But then comparing it to something from, like, peak Warner Brothers, 1946, which was like 10 years earlier, it's just kind of jarring. You're seeing this wonderful bit of animation of him at the piano, and then you're seeing everything else. Again, is it the worst thing? No. So I mentioned already, this is a time capsules on 1950s television. So, you had the 30s and 40s as time capsules involving the radio. And here you have McKimson, and I think it's really more so Ted Pierce, if I'm being honest, doing the television parodies to the point where they're just everywhere. A lot of this stuff most of you may not know. So we're going to go through all of them.
Anthony has personally selected the two people that he contributes to that actually know a lot about old TV history.
Now, I know of a lot of these shows, and I have seen some of them, but have I seen all of them? No. And I don't think there's an expectation that I would have, but I've sampled some of this.
There are two of them that we expect you to have seen. The other ones, no.
Yeah, exactly. And the first one that we expect you guys have seen is the Groucho Marx one. What is the Groucho Marx one? Kamden, I'll let you say, because you love this scene so much.
I just like Groucho. But this is based on You Bet Your Life, which was a show that he first did on radio and then he did on television, in which it would eventually be called The Groucho Show as well. And I must also point out, by the way, that there are two different connections you could put onto Groucho. That Groucho in this scene is voiced by Dawes Butler, who would eventually appear as Groucho's guest on You Bet Your Life. So when he was already the voice of Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear, and you could see that online. You'd also see online, which Dawes Butler was the first voice of Beanie the Puppet. The second voice of Beanie the Puppet was Jim McGeorge, who also appeared on Groucho Marx's show. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that two reasons. First of all, that episode was the first televised appearance of Phyllis Diller, the comedian, which is a very famous episode of Groucho Show. And the other reason is, at the time Jim McGeorge appeared on Groucho Show, he was not an actor. He was the writer of the Bugs Bunny Looney Tunes comic books for Dell Publishing, and he mentions that on Groucho Show.
But of course, the spoof here, and I just wanted to touch upon this while we're on the topic of You Bet Your Life, is that the parody here is You Beat Your Wife.
It has to be one of the darkest Looney Tunes gags.
It's one of my arguments where I tell people, no, these weren't originally specifically made for kids, okay? Because they wouldn't do such a joke.
By the way, and speaking of the Groucho Marx reference, it should be noted that the You Beat Your Wife joke, out of context, let's be real, it's kind of an old school dry boomer joke or a dad joke. The fact that it's a parody of You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx, that's what Groucho was actually doing at the time. Long after the Marx Brothers disbanded and stopped appearing in movies and all that stuff, the fact that all of them went on to do their own thing, and Groucho especially found a new following in television.
Also, Elmer basically confesses to it.
Well, they used to clip it out on Nickelodeon.
What they do is they put this thing to cover the actual title of the show. So you just see Bugs and Groucho, and yeah.
And I think, saw this cartoon as part of the Bugs Bunny's Mad World of Television special on a VHS tape. And I can tell you right now, I do not think that 1982 special had this gag in it.
Yeah. But I'll ask you, Mark. Now, just very briefly, for those who haven't seen You Bet Your Life, just briefly, what is that show about? What actually happens?
It's a game show that's really an excuse to have Groucho Marx interview people. But depending on what season you watch, because I've watched a lot of them, some seasons they have very silly, easy questions, and the prizes are like $5, $10, which wasn't a lot even then, compared to like the $64,000 question, let's say. But then there's a couple of seasons where they actually got a little more serious, and some of the questions were really hard. And I just was shocked that, hey, wow, they actually tried. And they would bring people back just like the Jeopardy Tournament of Champions. So there's a couple of seasons there they tried, probably because they were made fun of. All this is just an excuse for Groucho to just say his witticisms.
This is the reason why they've tried to recreate this show with several times. They tried it with Bill Cosby. Unfortunately, they tried it with Jay Leno. And it does not work for one reason, is that people weren't on the show really because they wanted money. They were on the show because they wanted to be mocked by Groucho.
Yeah, and in an interesting twist, there actually was a real parody that came later, a live-action one that was done by Edgar Bergen, and it was called Do You Trust Your Wife? So it's, really bizarre. So that's for the other references. I'll go through the very quick ones, and then we will circle back to Liberace.
And of course, there's other fun references like You're Asking For It, which is a parody of You Asked For It.
Remember, you're asking for it.
But even putting that aside, that is a very typical Looney Tunes joke. Come on, let me have it. Okay, but remember, you asked for it, Doc. That is very clearly a Bugs Bunny gag.
So when Elmer wanders onto the set and gets a cherry pie smashed onto his face, there's a parody. It's called You're Asking For It, and that's a parody of You Asked For It. So that was like a human interest show where viewers write in wanting to see some bizarre or dangerous stunts, like seeing a man wrestle a bear. Maybe it's a precursor to Jackass, I don't know, but it sounds like it. I haven't seen this one myself. But yeah, that's what that parody is. By the way, some of these shows, it may be hard to see because they didn't exactly keep everything. So sometimes the only thing surviving would be some kinescopes, and that's it, if we're lucky.
If you want to see You Asked For It, if it's not already on YouTube, the actual host came back in an early episode of Happy Days, and they did a takeoff on it. They didn't call it You Asked For It, they call it I Want to See It. But the way it worked is they would say, so-and-so wrote a letter here, like it'd say, Kamden Spies from wherever you are in Indiana, wrote a letter saying, I want to see the Fonz jump his motorcycle over a bunch of school buses. And that's what they did on that episode. And they'd show it. So in the case of You Asked For It,
you asked for it and you got it. So there we are. This is the bit that I referenced earlier on where Bugs is just as an usher. This is the bit that they reused later on with Daffy Duck as well. He directs Elmer onto the set of a reenactment of Custer's Last Stand. Brilliant, of course. And the show's gimmick was treating history as a live event, really. So the parody here is You Were There, but the show was called You Are There. And that was hosted by Walter Cronkite.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Which, of course, any history of the 1950s was always accurate when they did it.
Yeah, and so it'd be like reenacting major historical events, like the Salem witch trials, that kind of thing, and it would be like news reporters covering those live as though television reporting was invented then.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, which is interesting.
I would take stories about Native Americans told in the 1950s with a grain of salt.
There's a very brief reference that after the arrows, we see the aftermath of Custer's Last Stand, and we see that Bugs points him to Studio C for the medic.
Studio C for the medic.
Oh, much obliged.
The show is also called a Medic. It's the same name, but that was a medical drama starring Richard Boone, and apparently it was very gritty. I haven't seen this one either.
I've never heard of this
I've seen a
one.
few episodes of it. If you like Richard Boone on Have Gun Will Travel, which is his other famous series, you'll like him on this. It's just a medical drama instead of a Western, but they're both very well made, very well written. And this is back when Richard Boone was actually a pretty good actor. Unlike later on when he did Eck Ramsey, and he was a very drunk actor.
Another one where Elmer is forced into a full-body rabbit costume to fit the Masquerade theme. So this is, the parody is Fancy Dress Party. That's a parody of the show Masquerade Party. I believe that's a panel game show where panelists had to ask yes or no questions, where the celebrities are heavily costumed and disguised. Kind of like, I don't know, The Masked Singer maybe? That might be a good...
Something like that. They did bring back Masquerade Party in the 70s, and that's when I saw it. They had Bill Bixby. I used to watch the Masquerade Party, and I said, this is a cool show. Unfortunately, the 70s version didn't last very long. I said Bill Bixby, but it might have been Richard Dawson. I think they were both on there, and Bixby might have been a panelist. So they had celebrity panelists similar looked like Match Game or Hollywood Squares, or even I've Got a Secret, where they tried to guess who was in costumes.
And one thing I want to point out as well, one of the traits of 1950s television are game shows. Lots and lots of game shows, right,
They were
Mark?
popular.
And guess
They were
what? Every
popular.
one of those game shows would be continued to be reformed and reshaped again and again. And as we've seen in the last few years, they're going to keep doing these game shows in a new format. And they work much better on television because they can do them live.
So that's one of the main reasons. But when done right, they're also very entertaining too. But I've left the Liberace reference till now. So you see Bugs, he says, "George, come here, George." And no, Kamden, I'm not trying to impersonate him. I'm just saying it, okay?
Go ahead.
Come here, George. Yeah, that's terrible. But look, this is not the first time Liberace has been referenced in Looney Tunes. That Otto goes to hide in hair, where there was the sequence at the piano. But this...
I wish my brother George was here. George. That's my brother George. Come over here, George.
But this one is a little bit more prominent because you can see Bugs' face change to resemble Liberace as he would be in the show. There's even a reference to the candelabra. But Mark, any further details about the show that people should know about?
You mentioned George Liberace. That really was his brother, and he played the violin. Liberace had this complicated first name, but I think people called him Leonard or something, if memory serves. I might be wrong on that one, that were close friends with him. But yeah, his brother would appear playing the violin and accompany him on the piano. So there we go.
And of course, the Liberace joke was a reference to Liberace's brother, who was also named George. But unless you're like a diehard Liberace fan, I don't think too many people would know of it. Otherwise, it's still a funny moment. And funny enough, in the Liberace segment, yes, they did not necessarily reuse animation from Rhapsody Rabbit, but it looks like they kind of traced over the footage to make it connect with how Bugs looked in Robert McKimson's shorts around at the time. Because if you compare the sequence from Rhapsody Rabbit to the footage here in Wideo Wabbit, it's not exactly the same design. Like, it's not necessarily just Jerry Chinicki or Virgil Ross's animation. No, it's someone else's animation in McKimson's later unit. Maybe George Grand Pré or Ted Bonnickson or something, who knows. And arguably speaking, it's probably one of the funnier segments in this cartoon. Not gonna lie, I think overall the jokes here kind of rely a bit too much on the references, which for all intents and purposes, reference humor, not everyone's going to get. But in my opinion, I don't think it matters too much if you don't get the reference, as long as the sequence itself is funny on its own, which humor is subjective anyway. But that being said, I think the sequence works not just as a cute little nod to Liberace, but it also works within the context of Elmer trying to find Bugs, and then, of course, him being so naive that he'll get caught up in a shenanigan of Bugs lighting what looks to be candles on a miniature candelabra or something, and then, it turns out to be dynamite. That's an old school Bugs Bunny gag if I've ever seen one.
And of course, Liberace would remain incredibly popular over the decades until his death in the 80s. I forgot which year offhand, but amazing pianist, and really, yeah, if you can check out any of his performances, amazing pianist and entertainer. He was amazing.
Yes. And he also did some acting roles, like on the Adam West Batman show. He played
Yes.
the villain.
The Jack Benny show a couple of times.
He's in a movie called The Loved One, which is a crazy movie to watch. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. So he just wanted to expand his career. And then later on in the 70s and 80s, he resorted to just being in Vegas, wearing very elaborate, very gaudy clothes and everything, and say, "How do you think I'm dressed? Am I beautiful?"
Which is how I'm dressed right now.
One other thing, to cross-act everything, Liberace also appeared on You Bet Your Life.
Yes.
Yeah, it's everything that comes together. But yes, I'm dressed up like Liberace right now. It's how I can get through these reviews. Gee, that's a really weird look. But so after all of that long discussion, but yeah, there was plenty of references. And honestly, the references are probably more interesting than the short itself. The short is fine for what it is.
I agree.
But it's fine. It actually is entertaining. I first saw this one on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 3. I never had any personal connection with this one.
And funny enough, my introduction to this film, I saw it on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 3. And as a little kid, I didn't really understand a lot of the references that were going on. Like, I didn't know too much about Groucho Marx outside of maybe a few instances of his trademark mustache in pop culture and all that. I certainly didn't know anything about Liberace. I barely do nowadays. But the thing is, as a kid, I still found these humorous just for what they were going for. Just the whole, oh, George, that's my brother George. I just loved cartoon characters saying George, not just whenever it came to that, but also the classic, which way do they go, George? Which way do they go? That Tex Avery and Bob Clampett made fun use of through their references to Of Mice and Men.
The only thing I really remembered from this one was just one bit, and I'll get to it when we go through the cartoon in order. But otherwise, it's a competent short, but it also shows just how McKimson was saddled with the lesser animators at this time, which is unfortunate. You saw this on TV. You mentioned before, like uncut.
It was a staple on the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner hour and show during the 70s. It was played a lot, and I think it's just because it's TV references on TV. There we go. Back in the 70s, they didn't cut anything from it. The later cuts were Nickelodeon, things like that. Fortunately, it's uncut again. Not that I like beating my wife, it's just I like uncut things when they're on home video.
I reckon we go through this short from start to finish. It's got some interesting stuff I wanted to point out, starting with Bugs Bunny. He's in, of course, rabbit hole, he's singing away, and what song does he sing? He sings This Is My Lucky Day.
Oh boy, I'm lucky. I'll say I'm lucky. This is my lucky day. Huh? What's this?
That song originated in 1926, but the most well-known version would have been done by Judy Garland around this time. Now, I don't know if that song came out earlier than this short and it was sung in a pickup session later on, or it was just coincidence. I don't know.
I always wondered. Mel Blanc did like to sing, would just sing these things. And then they say, hey, that's good. Sing that in the cartoon. And then they get it on tape.
It's possible, but it's also possible that if Garland's song came out earlier, that they just had him sing it in like a pickup session and they just added it in, because you don't actually see him sing it.
Right.
He's actually in the hole. And then he pops out. So they didn't have to animate the mouth. Maybe he was singing something else and then he just sung it. So it's possible. Looking at the newspaper, which looks like it's just some generic newspaper that was lying around. And of course, they pasted on top what they needed for the short that we have to see. But that address at the bottom, that's the Warner Brothers studio address, if I'm not mistaken. So 1351 North Van Ness, Hollywood. But this station named QTTV, some have suggested it might have been a parody of KTTV, which was a station in Los Angeles at the time.
I'm wondering why they didn't just decide to make it like a Warner Brothers TV station or something like that.
It sounds like cutie TV, like cutie, you're a cutie, whatever. That's what I'm thinking. It's just a silly pun, QTTV. Q is actually equidistant between K and W in the alphabet, and K is the West Coast call letters and W is the East Coast call letters for the United States. So consider that. I don't know.
But we see that in Studio K, our producer, now I was alluding to before something that I remembered from this short specifically, and it's actually this producer's jacket. And this is one of those little shortcut things that they'll try to make things, I guess, more graphic or modern style. Instead of animating all those lines, it's just flat. And so as the person moves, it stays flat, which gives it a really weird look.
One thing I did want to note is that TV producer, if you look closely at his suit or jacket or whatever, you'll notice that the design kind of stays in place. Like, it doesn't move in motion to the jacket. There's been a few animated programs that have done similar techniques where if you look closely, anytime the characters move, certain designs within their clothes or such would actually stay in place rather than moving in conjunction to the clothing. I don't remember what the technique is called, but it's a really fascinating technique. And as far as I know, the only other time that at least McKimson used it was in the Foghorn Leghorn cartoon Foxy Terror, where the fox who's disguised as that weird looking mysterious guy, if you look at his clothes, the design kind of stays in place. And I'm actually kind of so surprised that McKimson didn't experiment more with this technique, but at the same time, it definitely sticks out in what's an otherwise decent but not super, I guess, remarkable cartoon.
I always like that effect, though.
So we see, as we pan up, that Elmer Fudd, he's become very successful. He's got his own TV show, the Sportsman Hour. Now, this isn't specifically parodying a TV show, but Mark, I'm sure you would know, there would have been a lot of these kind of shows where you would have someone like, how to go fishing or hunting and that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. TV gobbled up a lot of time, and so they had to play a lot of different things. And, And the one thing they couldn't get on TV is current movies, so they had to put on things like wrestling, which got very big, and all sorts of sports.
This is why, like in the beginning of television, the two biggest things were wrestling, and this is why cartoons became famous.
Yeah.
There are other reasons why cartoons were synonymous with children, Saturday matinees and other reasons before this.
Yeah,
But
they needed lots of content. We pan past and we see Elmer Fudd, who's doing an okay job introducing things. We see a few characters in the directing booth there. They just see him very briefly, but the woman looks so weird the way she's drawn.
I like how they look. I think these side characters are so weird looking.
Yeah, especially compared to Bugs and Elmer, characters from pretty much the 40s. It's just an interesting little
Right.
contrast. Elmer Fudd, he's saying he's sponsored by, and he does his old Fuddies things.
Hello, TV friends everywhere. Once again, French-fried, fresh frozen Wabbit Company brings you the Sportsman's Hour with handy hunting hints by yours truly, Elmer Fudd.
So, of course, they always choose a sponsor where it makes them sound the funniest.
I do think it's funny that the Sportsman's Hour is sponsored by the French Fried Fresh Frozen Rabbit Company. So maybe that's the company that Elmer Fudd's been a part of the whole time. Who knows? But as a hunter, hey, it kind of works, right?
But I do like McKimson's directing here. You can say what you want, but at least about his directing in general, but at least he's thinking here how to make it more interesting. So we start with him talking, but we cut across to the directing booth. We cut to him on the actual television monitor. So at least it's interesting in that sense. So I thought that was a nice little touch. But what do we see now? We see Elmer. He decides to show how to kill a rabbit, basically, on live television. I mean,
Told you they were short for material. They needed material for television.
Oh man, the way you worded that was perfect. That
can you
was
just
funny.
picture him, like, if you actually got a different rabbit who was none the wiser, he just shoots him cold blood, and we just... I guess black and white TV would have mitigated a little bit of the blood, I guess, but yeah, it'd be kind of gruesome, yeah? Yeah, he's pretty angry with Elmer, and he thinks this whole thing is Elmer being jealous of him being a new star or an upcoming star. It's a great little dynamic I quite enjoy with this one. It's your standard Elmer Bugs sort of thing, just another little twist into it, I guess.
I just like Mel Blanc's scream.
Hey, what's going... Who's the... what's up, Doc? Hey, cut that out. What's the big idea when I'm supposed to...
Shh, be quiet, you crazy dumb rabbit. You're ruining my show. Everybody's looking at you.
There?
That sounds like it's reused quite a bit, though, because I hear that
Oh, it
same
probably
scream.
is. I didn't say it's brand new for this cartoon. It's
No.
just it's a scream that I liked.
Because this is a Carl Starling score, so we do hear a few musical puns in here. One of the interesting things is that you hear the puns, but you do hear one cue that comes back all the way from a wild hare or thereabouts, which is what Manny Cruz calls the Starling cue in G. The old bum 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 bum, and that's just a made-up cue that Carl Starling did, but he reused that constantly, even before he arrived at Warner's.
Now be very, very quiet. First, I track him by his footprints. Then I stop at the proper distance from the hole, raise my hand, and give the signal.
So I thought it was interesting that he used it again
Wait, did
here.
Carl Starling, had he not retired by this time?
No, he's still got a few more cartoons left. He's alternating with Milt. He'll retire in 50. Still gonna do a few more. But the animation, though, when we hear one of the cues when the Bugs get shot, that's an interesting one to slow-mo. That's such a weird smear. We can see that Elmer is basically saying, "Quiet, you idiot, we're on the air," and he does that brief smile to the audience. And I thought that was a nice little animation quirk there. It just shows just how, unfortunately, McKimson didn't have the best animators at the time, as we see our producer holding up a sign saying, "Program temporarily interrupted, please stand by." Which I feel like I should be using more often when we record. Program temporarily interrupted. Honestly, the best part of this short, once this intro part's done, when we go through the studio, we've been through all the references already, of course. We're not going to go through them again, unless you guys want to. The scene that we first see, again, we're all in agreement. Amazing scene, hilarious, and it's perfectly on point with Groucho. And just the fact that more or less Elmer admits to beating his wife, I think is Looney Tunes perfection.
Welcome, welcome to You Beat Your Wife. Say the magic word and win $100. Now, what is your name, sir, and what do you do?
I'm a Fudd. I'm a hunter. I'm hunting for a rabbit, a crazy fresh rabbit.
Oh, a fresh hair fiend, huh?
It's such a horrific reference, though. It's like, why would you say that?
Exactly.
He's like, yes, I mean, no.
Well, Mr. Fudd, for $50, have you stopped beating your wife? Answer yes or no.
Why, yes. I mean, no. Well, that is, I've never... Well,
While you're making up your mind, I'll go slip out of these wet clothes and into a dry martini, huh?
But speaking of that Liberace scene, I like the fact he's called Liberace. So, like, why? I don't know. But the creepiest look on this one is when Bugs says, "Oh, George," and he's got those piano teeth. That's got to be one of the creepiest faces that Bugs has ever done. I'm sure we can agree with.
I did that because I want my program to go over with a bang.
But the candelabra bit was kind of a weird one. So what, they just happen to have the 4 sticks of dynamite right
Yeah,
there?
please.
That's some candelabra. We see Custer's last stand, which we've already seen. But this is also one of those things where, on the one hand, yes, lowering of budgets meant less animation is always welcome. But on the other hand, I think the effect is really funny here because we just see the aftermath. Because those arrows would hurt now, wouldn't they?
Now, I will say, to this very day, the one joke I still don't really get, if only because it's vague, even for its own good, is the bit where Elmer enters the studio room that's pretty much a parody of You Are There, called You Were There, which is reenacting Custer's Last Stand. And admittedly, I don't know too much about Custer's Last Stand. That being said, the reason I think it's the weakest gag is, never mind that you don't really see what happens, so it does lessen the impact, which I'm not going to blame them too much. Of course, it was budgetary reasons and all that. But I think just the fact that we could hear what's going on, and the only punchline is Elmer leaving the studio all wrecked up and with a bunch of like bows and arrows on him. It's just kind of a weak payoff for what's an otherwise mediocre setup and punchline. But I think that's the only like truly mediocre, downright bad joke in the entire short. I think everything else works okay.
But you will see a lot of things, especially in Frizz Friendly shorts, where there's a lot of cutaway action around this time. In this case, it works, and there's even a tomahawk on his head, for crying out loud. Ouch. And by the way, he's wearing some really interesting looking boxer shorts, the whole pink and yellow spots. Typical cartoon boxer shorts. Lovely. But a quick change of clothes, and he's seeing this other producer. And I've always wondered, or host, or whoever Bugs is parodying here, but I've always wondered, is this the actual parody of the host of that show at the time, the Masquerade Party? I don't know.
I don't know either, but it's a neat costume.
Yeah, just expression on Bugs' face and the glasses. There's great animation there.
Let's see. I will look up who hosted Masquerade Party. A person named Peter Donald. Sorry, I'm not sure who that is.
Me neither.
And then Eddie Bracken, Robert Q. Lewis, and Burt Parks. The later one, since I said Bill Bixby, Richard Dawson was the host, but Bill Bixby was a panelist with Dipsy Russell and Lee Merriweather. That's the one I saw.
You know what is amazing, though? Just Elmer in that pink bunny costume. You'd think a rational human would just say, you know, I'm not wearing this. No, he just goes along with it and just happens to put it on. You gotta love Elmer. One of the greatest stupid characters of all time. Love it. Goes on, and we get a role reversal of the original scene, and for some reason the producer can't seem to tell what his style is supposed to look like, and clearly it's not Elmer.
I don't think he cares
I think
enough.
he just cares about putting out a show.
You just like somebody getting tortured.
Very violent short without showing anything.
And of course, Bugs is promoting gun safety by shooting a shotgun behind him with a mirror, because that's clearly what gun safety is all about, right? Isn't that how people shoot their guns? Yeah.
Yeah.
But the weirdest effect is at the end. So we see that Elmer's furious, most of his clothes are blown off, but what's the deal with his ears? I always thought it was a weird thing. Was that supposed to be colored? Was it just strands? I think, yeah, maybe you guys can help me with that one.
I think that they didn't ink it properly, and it was too expensive to go back to fix it.
But that's what I think too.
Although
because
now, digitally, they could fix it, and they still leave it, so it looks like two literal rabbit ears on a TV set, but maybe that was the effect they're trying to.
Either way, it just looks really weird.
It
But
does look weird.
Or maybe it's a cartoon and it's supposed to look weird.
It's always looked weird to me.
But Kamden, as we wrap up this carded, who makes a cameo at the very end, aside from, of course, those Groucho glasses and mustache on Elmer?
She would have Groucho, like that Ed Norton thing.
Yeah, which will lead into the next review the three of us will be on, which of course is the Honey Mouses. But I think we've covered everything to death on this one.
I do think the short kind of ends on a bit of, I don't want to say a whimper per se, but it just kind of ends out of left field. It ends off with Elmer being in Bugs' position before, being shot instead. And then instead of Elmer maybe being thrown out of the studio for going crazy, or Bugs just kind of taking over everything, it just kind of ends with Bugs dressed as Ed Norton from the Honeymooners and saying, "Take it easy, Groucho, have a cigar." I'll admit, it is kind of cute to hear Dawes Butler's impression of Ed Norton as Bugs in the short, which also kind of signaled that Dawes Butler would stay on for the Looney Tunes for Lord knows how long. But it's also nice to hear what is more or less a prototype of Yogi Bear, if we're really going to think about it. But I don't know, it's just kind of a whimper of a payoff. I don't know how else to describe it.
In terms of a score, see, again, I think the trio is way more interesting than the short itself, but is this a bad one? This one, it's fun, it's competent. I had fun with this one, despite some of the animation being not as great as, McKimson used to have on his team.
No, I think what falters it is not the animation in the cartoon, it's the animation that's reused that does not mix well with the cartoon.
As well, yeah. This gets a 6 out of 10. It's fine. I like it. But it's nothing too special.
Yeah.
I think 6 is a fair score. What do you guys think?
I think 6 is a fair score, too. I think anything with Groucho gets a 7, though.
Yeah. I have to say this. When I was a kid, I loved this short. So as a kid, I probably would have given this an 8. It's gone down in a few years because not much happens, really. And that's to its detriment. It's just an excuse. It's almost like Ted Pierce was sitting home one night watching TV and just writing notes. Oh, I watched Liberace, then I watched You Bet Your Life, and then here's my script.
Overall, I think I'll give Wideo Wabbit a very generous 6 out of 10. For what it's going for, it got the references down okay, but I feel like it probably could have used a bit more spice. Again, I think the ending would have been improved with Elmer just being thrown out of the studio, and then Bugs can do his Ed Norton reference just afterwards, but they probably had to get this short out the door as soon as possible, so I'm not going to fault them too much, but yeah, those are my thoughts, and hope y'all have a cigar.
Yes, for sure. But yeah, I think 6 out of 10, or 6 or 7 is about there. But that will do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
Oh, no. Oh, you if I go away.
Hey, take it easy. Have a cigar. Gee, what a Groucho. Boom.